Welcome to episode 3. Kevin Hollinrake MP for Thurston Moulton, 10 years in the role. Apologies for the last ending of the episode. The bell you heard, all the MPs were called to vote, so Kevin's back. So we're going to go straight into this topic, which is probably the biggest one, certainly closest to my heart, and that's mental health in construction. Kevin, this isn't the easiest topic. It's certainly not one to celebrate by any stretch, but it's something we've got to talk about. The latest figures, we are 4 times more likely as a construction worker to take our own life than any other industry. I'm going to ask a really blunt question. Why aren't government doing more? Because this has been going up year on year for a long time. ONS can't give us an accurate figure. I have that in writing from them, and I appreciate why, because of the subgroups and minor groups. But some figures are up to 2 a day.
Terrible, Andy. And, I don't think there's any family in this country. I'm part of a big family, both in terms of siblings and children, that hasn't been affected by mental health. And it's coming at people from all directions and all kinds of problems. I mean, it's a terrible statistic that you're 4 times more likely in this sector. I'm very happy to work with you and the sector to find out why that is and what's particularly driving that. You may have more insight to that than I have. I mean, just so when they say the government's doing not enough, of course you can always do more. We do spend over 14 billion pounds a year on mental health, not specifically for construction, but across the piece, and that's growing exponentially. So it's a big issue. It's getting bigger. We were doing some stuff in terms of how the additional interventions, and the government's brought forward these ideas for mental health A&Es, kind of crisis centres, which sound sensible. It's almost reached epidemic proportions, certainly mental health, and suicide is directly connected to that, of course.
I think the difficult thing for me is I've been up and down the country. I've spoken to over 5,000 trades face to face. We've done research. We've worked with government bodies. We've worked with CLC. We've worked with all sorts of tier 1, tier 2s, micro, SME. We know the reasons. I've said this to Mark Reynolds from Mason, the CLC. I've said to him bluntly, I know exactly what is the reason for this. I think the difficult thing is, in order to put something in place, my opinion, it's got to be legislation, because things are written into contracts, things are written into prelims. But obviously, my view, what's in place isn't working because the numbers are still going.
You tell me the reasons. What are the reasons?
So the main reasons are working away from home.
Yeah.
You become lonely. You do stay in rubbish accommodation, let's be fair.
Right.
What happens? You eat crap, you drink, and then each time it goes up a level. Soft drugs, hard drugs, gambling, prostitution, whatever. So that is and we've got a lot of research coming out proving eating and drinking rubbish does fuel your mental health problems. Van and tool theft we talked about in a previous episode. Not getting paid is a huge one. Getting knocked, as we call it, as I'm sure you're aware of. The pressure you're put under on a big site, on a tier 1, tier 2, you know that you can be released on a Thursday without pay if they're behind budget, behind schedule. We've literally got it all written down.
Okay.
But I think the frustration is we're not getting anywhere further forward.
Okay.
And we had another couple last week that we got.
That's terrible. It's terrible. And well, we should definitely, you having identified some of the causes, we should look at the causes and try and address that. That's the most important thing, as well as providing support at the other end. And I'm happy to talk with you about support. I know you provide support for people. But if you're looking at those causes of retentions, we wanted to bring forward some legislation in the last Parliament, which we didn't manage to effect before the election was called, about retentions, about clarity on retentions. And that's just one step in that direction. There's obviously lots of different people who like to push for escrow agreements on retentions to try and make sure people aren't put under due financial pressure. And we know some rogue operators do that.
Big time. I mean, there's jobs advertised, 188-day payment.
Yeah.
And you think, that's half a year. Once you've got your invoice in, if you get the PO number wrong or accounts are busy, it's suddenly...
Sure.
It's...
Well, again, and late payment... prompt payment was a key part of what we tried to do as well, to make sure the payments were made in good time and that there weren't those kind of abuse of process and exploitation of subcontractors. You mentioned before, you said theft. Again, we need to do more to make sure that's not the society we live in. So, but as well as that, we need to make sure there's mental health provision and people when they are in crises. Now, again, I'm happy to sit and explore with you, and I say the luxury of our position, we have some time to look at these specific things. The best mental health support mechanisms I've seen in all the time I've been a member partner for 10 years are ones provided by the particular sector those people are affected by. For example, there's something called Rock to Recovery, which is for people who've served in the armed forces. And the people who help them help the armed forces personnel who have these kind of suicidal thoughts or severe mental health difficulties is provided by people who've experienced exactly the same thing, be PTSD or whatever else, because you understand it more readily. And you don't just fit in, you go into the sausage machine, which can be the NHS. So it could be the case that we find a better route through your knowledge and through your experiences to deliver something that will be more effective rather than going into just expanding what's already there.
That's key. Construction's so different to forces, retail, travel, finance.
Yeah.
It's a very different animal. And I think, as you rightly say, somebody focused in that sector will make a big, big difference. How hard, this is a broad question for the viewers, because a lot of people have asked me this, how hard is it for government to put in legislation that would protect individuals' mental health, such as, for example, if you walk onto a site and a digger falls over and crushes someone, boom, site shut, HSE all over it. Yeah. Mental health, there's 2 hanging from that bit of scaffolding there. Bodies are taken down, they get 2 replacements in within the hour, off they go. Is legislation a long-term thing? Because my view, we need legislation to enforce this.
Okay. Again, we should discuss it at length. In more length, probably we can do this interview. The thing you don't want, you've also got to see it from a business owner's perspective. I don't think any business person that I know would be callous to think, oh, just clear the bodies away, get 2 more people in. You know, there's most employers, decent employers, act responsibly and would be devastated by that situation if that specific situation happened. Or even if, or similarly, if that person could be to suicide in a different circumstance at home or whatever. You still, as I was employed 1,000 people, you feel a personal responsibility for those people you employ. What you don't want, though, is to... You know, and I know what happens if there's an accident a serious accident in a construction site. You are under severe pressure as a business owner at that point in time. You can be closed down, you can be penalty fined, locked up, all that kind of stuff. Suicides are complex. They don't just pertain to one particular part of your life generally. And to think that business would have to go through the same situation, in that situation it might be something less connected or disconnected from the workplace, I think might put an undue burden on businesses.
I think that was my apologies, the way I worded the question. We've had a lot of, sadly, it is a lot now, of very clear-cut cases where that person, man or woman, has taken their own life because of stresses in the workplace. And that includes private emails to their bosses. And again, evidence shows if you've got stress at work, you'll take your own life at work. If you've got stress at home, you'll do it at home, in the garage, in the woods. And again, these are all examples of people I know that have lost someone. So I think the clear thing is, if it's suicide, the big thing in construction as an industry, because of the social demographics, a lot of young families, kids at a young age, not very good with money, difficulties with relationships, eat rubbish, etc. So there is a lot of external factors, but there are such very clear-cut examples where that poor guy's been pushed, he can't cope.
Yeah.
And I think that's where legislation...
How much is the industry doing itself to try and solve that problem in terms of promoting good best practice, putting provisions in place so people have somewhere to go if they feel that kind of stress?
My opinion is very little. Right. There's a huge amount of tick box, flag waving, do the bare minimum. Right. Ooh, Mental Health Awareness Week, chuck something on LinkedIn, social media. Yeah. Oh, hang on, now it's Pride next month, let's put that flag up. I think there's a lot of people talking a good game, but the reality is things are getting worse. And if the numbers were coming down, we couldn't really have this conversation, but they're going up. Anything you'd like to see put in place around this? Appreciate it's a difficult question, but my view is being proactive is a lot better than being reactive. 6 years ago, I was lucky to survive a suicide attempt. I wasn't going to pick up the phone. I wasn't going to download an app or text somebody. When your mind's made up, it's made up. I think if you don't allow that person to get there because we're being more proactive, to me, and again, I don't know there's a lot of things that can be put in place, but do you think we need to be a bit more proactive? Because when it's time, it's time.
Yeah, of course it should. And you're right. You've got to catch that as early as possible. And I say everybody in some way, be it through a family member or whatever, has experienced some kind of mental health problem, I think. So, of course we should. The provision needs to be made available through the relevant sources of the NHS, but also it sounds to me like something that we should work on best practice within the industry, with the sector. That's far quicker than legislation. And everybody thinks legislation solves all problems. I promise you it doesn't. It ends up with, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for legislation at times, there is. But it's easier, quicker, cheaper for everybody concerned to resolve the matter, resolve these kind of issues by industry collaboration, best practice, working hard, making sure people understand the nature of these problems and why they happen. Again, Andy, very happy to work with you and see what we can do. We have one thing you do as government or as members of parliament, shadow ministers, you have convening power, and we could put together a forum with people in the sector, be it the tier 1, tier 2 contractors, all the way down to the SMEs, to say, this is something we should be focused on. I'm sure we get a lot of support.
Well, that's brilliant, because I think the difficulties at the moment, there's a lot of focus on organisations like the CLC and other Build UK, name quite a few, most if not all are voluntary, and everyone's under pressure.
Yeah.
Not enough hours in the day, full-time job. So that's something we will look at. Just a couple of questions. What have we got? We've got a ground worker. We have a shortage of skilled workers, as it is well publicised, and the government pledging for record amounts of houses to be built over the next 5 years. Are the government aware of the thousands of UK workers that have taken their own lives in the past decade, and should there be a public inquiry into understanding why these figures continue to rise? The industry can't keep its current workforce alive, let alone build another 1.5 million homes.
Well, I think from what we've discussed, you know the reasons. Public inquiry will just tell you what you already know, I think, probably from what...
Do you not give it more weight with the public, like research? Because we've got so much research, I can fill your office with it.
Yeah,
we don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
But does the public inquiry give it that weight?
The trouble with the public inquiry, and I speak frankly, I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do, but you are talking probably a timescale of years, not months. Right. And a huge cost to it, and I'll probably come back to the same place we started from, which is all the reasons you listed. So of course it can draw attention to the issue, but I think there are ways we can do that. And I think a campaigner such as yourself, as well as doing a very good job in representing the construction industry, I would regard you as a campaigner on this particular issue. I think we can make a lot of progress, which might then lead to something more formal. There are other opportunities as well, things like the Select Committee, Housing Communities Local Government Select Committee. We could write to them and say, this is something that the evidence you've got, this is something, and they could do an inquiry in it in terms of this, which would be, and those are useful. They gather evidence. They have expert witnesses. They may well, I'm sure, will call you as an expert witness to be able to give evidence, and they make some recommendations, and they do that in a matter of months at zero cost rather than years at extensive cost. The big advantage with a public inquiry, a statutory one, is if you think you have witnesses that be reluctant to give evidence, that you can force them to give evidence and force them to reveal evidence. It wouldn't strike me that the evidence isn't readily available from what we've said.
No, I think as well, there's one lady in particular who came to me. Her husband worked for a very big tier 1. Basically, it's difficult to say this, went to go to work one morning. She got the call, please come and identify the body. Yeah. She dug. Perfect family. Lovely kids, doing well, retiring early, holidays. So when you look from the outside, they were perfect. But it was found in some emails that, I can't cope with this workload, please give me some space. To me, that's quite concrete evidence, but she doesn't want to say anything, and I get that. This was years ago, it wasn't a few months ago. They're still not over this. So I think forcing her to, I think that'd be quite tough. Yeah. So I think, as you say, maybe that wouldn't be. But I want to finish on a positive. I really appreciate your offer to work with me on this, because I my mission's the same. When I get in my little ply box in the ground in a few years, if we can get these numbers down and workers' health in a better state, that's me done. So, Kevin, thank you.
Pleasure.
Next week, moving the industry forward. The final in this 4-part series with Kevin Hollinrake MP.